Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, June 26th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about abortion access across the United States and why this decision from the United States Supreme Court will ultimately end up hurting the Republican Party for the midterms and many future elections. With Roe v. Wade being a precedent that was set back in 1973, it became very difficult for the Democratic Party to make abortion access and abortion legalization a mainstream public issue. And the reason for that was because that precedent had been tried and tested over the past 5 decades, and successfully every single time Roe v. Wade was defended. Up until recently, as of Friday, the first time the U.S. Supreme Court has gone back on this decision, we have found that Roe v. Wade has been overturned and abortion access across the United States has been limited already in just the span of 2 days in 11 states, with nearly full and total complete bans on abortion access across every single state that has already made these declarations. There are huge states that have made decisions and determinations that abortion will no longer be legal in their states, such as Texas or Ohio, very populous states with millions and millions of residents who can terminate a pregnancy previously that no longer can. So now, as the New York Times headline states, it becomes real. The abortion decision has roiled the midterm elections, sending the fight to the states for the first time since 1973. Now, I made a video talking about yesterday the decision and its impact on the midterms, but I didn't really go too in depth about why this is actually such a bad look for the GOP. There are many times where we have seen states individually decide whether or not they wish for there to be a right for abortion access across their state. Statewide referendums are one of the best ways to check the true determination about where people stand on Roe v. Wade. Across the United States, the opinions of many residents in terms of their approval of Roe v. Wade, if we were to characterize it with the Democratic color, let me go ahead and just load up the map here. If we were to characterize the states that the Democratic Party would win should abortion access be the only issue, you would see a significant portion of this map turn blue. Looking at the map, let's go ahead and pull it up here. I'm going to characterize all of the states where you see a plus in terms of those who approve of legalized abortion versus those who do not. And you find it even in some states where you might not necessarily expect it. I'm going to characterize all the states you might expect, the blue states, the states that were won by Joe Biden in the 2020 election, because these are states where maybe you could have predicted it. Maybe it was possible to say automatically that the opinion on abortion was going to be positive, simply because of, or this is Hillary Clinton's map, we actually have states that Joe Biden won that might not necessarily be approved of. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this map. We have so far 276 electoral votes. That's for the Democratic Party already. But it actually gets a lot worse for the GOP. It isn't just these Clinton states that approve of access to abortion. It's also the states that Biden won, Arizona and Georgia. You also have North Carolina, which Biden did not win, Clinton did not win, Obama won once. You have Florida. You have Ohio and Iowa, states that you might not necessarily expect it looking at the last election, but you absolutely do. You have Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, Montana, Alaska. These are states where, on one hand, you might be saying, Republicans don't support the right to abortion. Republicans are pro-life, and they are vehemently so. Yet somehow these states, in approval rating polls or questions done, show that they approve of a legal right to abortion. But these are just polls. These are not perfect indicators about where every single state might vote. States do decide to vote however they might, based off a number of issues, but abortion has rarely ever been a mainstream one. That's mainly because of Roe v. Wade, because the precedent was set and it had never become real until now, until that draft leak opinion was released, until the decision was actually dropped on Friday morning. The decisions made here have tremendous impacts, because that electoral map, while probably will not become a reality, does show the significant amount of support there is for abortion across the United States and abortion access within our nation. But as I said previously, we can take a look at actual votes, actual statewide referendum votes in red states, in swing states, and we will find nearly almost always, even in some of the reddest states across the nation, that the decision for a woman to choose about her reproductive health is ultimately up to her, as determined by many of these states. So these abortion referendums come in very different fashions. On one hand, it could come through the definition of a person amendment, where it might define a person at conception. It might define a person at the moment of fertilization. And these are the initiatives typically used by red states and swing states where it might end up on the ballot in order to adjust the Constitution to protect or prevent abortions by redefining what a person is. They might not necessarily directly pass a bill, as they did in Mississippi, though, because they were trying everything that they could. But back in 2011, the way that they wanted to go about this was hold a mid-year election, not a midterm, not a presidential election, but a 2011 election, in which voters were going to turn out and make a decision about what they defined as a person. Because if it was to be defined as the moment of fertilization, a woman could go to jail for murder for having an abortion in Mississippi because of how a person is defined in the Mississippi Constitution. It isn't just that. There are other initiatives, for instance, a straight ban, where they will send it to a red state and say, do you support a ban measure? Do you, the people, believe that abortion should be banned across your state? And that's another question. Very basic, very simple, and very obvious what it is trying to achieve. It isn't just that. There is also amendments where they might go into constitutional right, no state constitutional right to an abortion, and allow legislative power to regulate abortion. These are amendments that are put forth, and this one was put forth in the perfect year for the GOP. It's 2014, a red wave. They win control of the Senate, maintain control of the House, and it pretty much sets up the Trump victory in 2016. But what this amendment was asking was, do you say the Tennessee Constitution does not secure the right to abortion, that the Constitution does not provide it, and that also the state legislature can pass laws regarding abortion? And you know what? Amendments like that sometimes pass, but not necessarily by the margins that you might expect. The point being that these amendments came in very different ways. They came in ways that are put in place in case Roe v. Wade was overturned, or in an effort to subvert Roe v. Wade, because people have been trying to do so for 50 years. The Republican Party has been fighting this for 50 years, and they finally won. But the point is that of the states that I showed you with my examples, these are red states. These are some of the reddest states you will ever find. South Dakota, Donald Trump won with 62% of the vote over President Biden at 36%. President Trump also won the state of Mississippi with 58% of the vote. He won neighboring Tennessee with 61% of the vote. Why am I telling you these margins? Take a closer look at some of those breakdowns based off of these initiatives. 2011, this was a solid red state, yet this measure failed 58-42. Take a look at South Dakota. The initiative to ban abortion failed 55-45. Take a look at Tennessee. It passed, but nowhere near where it was for President Trump versus Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, where it was for Mitt Romney, John McCain over Barack Obama, where it was for practically any other modern-day Republican in this state. Tennessee is a solid red state, yet somehow this amendment only passed by 5 points in a state that otherwise is expected to be pro-life plus 20, plus 30. When it comes down to actually voting and it comes down to actual measures, these red states turn on their pro-life supposed ideology. Because truly speaking, as established by opinion polls, as established by internal data, doesn't exist to the extent that Republicans would like. The majority of the nation is not pro-life. The majority of these states are not pro-life. And you don't just find it in these examples in Mississippi or South Dakota or Tennessee. You also see it in West Virginia, one of the most conservative states in the nation. Joe Biden lost this state by 40 points in the 2020 election, yet 2 years prior. A question here saying that nothing in this Constitution secures or protects the right to abortion in West Virginia only passed by, guess what? 3 percentage points. Think about that. A state that Joe Biden lost by 40, and West Virginia only approves of this pro-life measure by 3. Just by 3. I mean, these decisions and these referendums that are being shot to the states are not passed easily. They are not passed without a hard fight because of the fact that there are pro-choice Republicans, because of the fact there are voters out there that are so big on government non-intervention that they don't even believe that abortion should be regulated at all, even if they don't personally believe in it. There are many Republicans out there that think this decision about Roe v. Wade going back to the states will only expand big government and intervention within a woman's right to choose. It doesn't mean they will vote Democrat, but it does mean that there are swayable voters here, because this issue has never been on the forefront of a main campaign since the 70s. This has never been a top priority topic for Democrats or Republicans because we knew exactly where it was. When Hillary Clinton was asked that question about Roe v. Wade, there was never a consideration that the Supreme Court might overturn it. It was always a question asked to Democrats and Republicans, but as we all knew then, the Supreme Court had tried and tested it before and never overturned Roe v. Wade. And there was no expectation that they would. Let's continue. North Dakota, another state where you would see something such as this, where voters, again, were never put on the ballot to vote in a presidential election truly about abortion until now. To vote into a midterm election about abortion until now. In 2014, we found that the North Dakota measure here to get rid of abortion access across the state failed with 64% of the vote. Donald Trump in 2020 won in North Dakota 65% of the vote. You head over to swing states, Colorado, for instance, an initiative to ban abortions after 22 weeks. Most nations across the world don't have abortion access after 15 weeks. This 22-week proposition was meant to be middle ground, but voters clearly did not see it that way. On the same ballot that Joe Biden won by 14, this passed by 18. There were voters out there that voted for Trump that said, I don't believe abortion should be banned. Looking in the state of Florida, you also have this question here. What they wanted to do was prohibit the state from spending public funds for abortion or health insurance that covers abortion coverage. And also talking about the state constitution, rewriting it so that it does not cover abortion. Well, what happened in that amendment? It ended up failing 55 to 45. This is also a state that voted for Barack Obama in this election by less than a point. Yet this initiative failed by 10 points. There were Romney pro-choice voters. The point is that they exist all across the nation, and it's not to say that Republicans don't have their own victories, of course, in their own states. Alabama had a state abortion policy amendment that passed with flying colors by a 19-point margin. Maybe it's not as impressive as Donald Trump's 30-point margin across the state or 25-point margin, but it's still impressive. It's still a good showing. This is not to say that any state that has thrown this proposition is going to shoot it down, Democrat, Republican, Independent alike. No, many Republican states would take an amendment such as this and pass it. But it's Alabama. It's a state that Democrats never thought was going to be competitive, never is going to be competitive for the foreseeable future, and it just makes sense that this passed. Same thing in Louisiana. There were amendments that passed across these red states because the pro-life ideology is still very rampant, but just not to the extent that Republicans hope. The pro-life ideology has been tried and tested in many red states as well. Alabama and Louisiana, surprisingly enough, are outliers. These consistent red states where election results are close and narrow and undecided are not outliers. They are the norm. They are the norm for red states where you see public opinion different than what you might expect at the ballot box. But the only main difference between this analysis a year ago and this analysis now is that voters actually have a possibility of voting with abortion rights in mind. Because as I said previously, it was all speculative. There was never really a consideration that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned to this extent, because now it finally has. 11 states have already banned abortion. 11 states have already implemented laws that prohibit women even potentially from going to other states to get an abortion. Looking at these bans in effect, we had 2 days since this decision, and countless abortions have been canceled, have been moved out of state, because you have many states with millions and millions of women residents that can no longer get this service that was promised to them by the decision in Roe v. Wade, promised to them by the United States Supreme Court in 1973. And as we see, it isn't just 11 states, it's also states with trigger bans that were made in case Roe v. Wade was overturned. North Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Tennessee, Mississippi, all states that were questioning whether or not that they should pass laws to ban abortion. Well, they decided that we are going to do it, but not in the way you might expect. They are going to do them in case Roe v. Wade is overturned, and now they are in effect, meaning that once the Attorney General signs off on it, saying that this law has now taken into effect, it's already been passed by the legislators, now it goes into effect. So it will be a significant portion of these red states, some of which had referendums completely against what was happening right now, such as South Dakota, which voted against this now new measure within their state where abortion access has been limited. The point being that across a lot of these states, this question about abortion has been tried and tested and in many times failed. But these state legislatures don't care because they are pushing a pro-life agenda because they were waiting for this day to come for 50 years. The problem for the GOP lies in the fact that people are going to be angry. Never once have voters had to take this into consideration when voting at the ballot box to this extent in the past 50 years. They might luck out by the fact that it is a year plagued by inflation, COVID-19, etc., things that were stacking up and have been stacking up against the Biden administration and the Biden administration's supposed inefficiency. I'm not going to declare it one way or the other, but we know how people feel. We know how the public approves of Biden, and they don't. But also, this is something that really has shaken up the midterms for a substantial reason. Enough so that even advocates close to Trump, including President Trump himself, is afraid that ending Roe v. Wade is now going to hurt his party. Because he's not stupid. Republicans have seen these numbers, yet they pass these laws anyway because they think it will remain popular. Well, first thing, it was never popular. It might be popular in states such as Alabama and Louisiana, but that's not the rest of the nation. And the rest of the nation has never had to put themselves close enough to this, to a point where they were this angry about an issue, or this passionate, or this vulnerable in some of the states where people no longer have access. We will see what happens in these midterm elections. But as I said months ago, nothing could have saved the Democratic Party more than this. This is something that the Democratic Party sees as a very, very bad decision. Something the Democratic Party, I'm sure, is very upset and afraid about. But they do know that now that there is this revitalized push for abortion access, abortion rights, it also means, should they retain the majorities, they might be able to do something nationwide. It does seem a little too late, especially with senators such as Joe Manchin now announcing that he would support codifying Roe v. Wade into law or something of the similar. But of course, things are a bit too late for people's liking, for obvious reason, because the decision has already been made. So we will see what happens. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, going to have to completely maneuver themselves differently these midterm elections as a result of it. But I can't say I'm surprised. This decision was leaked, and we knew that it was coming, and we knew that the ramping up of the efforts, pro and against choice, were going to start coming forth through the midterm elections, but nowhere near to this extent that we actually have seen it coming. And nothing is going to really make these midterm elections normal now that we have multiple issues on the ballot rather than just one, or rather than the stereotypical, do I approve of the president or not? It's going to be a whole lot more than that. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.